Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ryan Taylor. I'm a principal at Ryan Taylor Architects. It's a pleasure to be joined by Dan and Nathan, so Nathan and Dan, to discuss a topic that we're all passionate about. So we'll do some brief introductions before we jump into our questions that we've prepared today. So Dan, why don't you lead off with an introduction, please?
Sure. Can everyone hear me? Hi, everyone. I would love the lights to be brighter. That'd be nice. I'm Dan Rosenfeld, co-founder of Electric Owl Studios. We are a new purpose-built film and TV studio that just opened last week here in Atlanta on the east side of town. We're the first LEED certified film and TV studio in the world and the greenest film studio in the world, and excited to talk to everyone today.
And I'm Nathan Bissett. I lead the technical services team at South Face Institute. South Face Institute is a 45-year-old nonprofit based in Atlanta that's been working on sustainability in construction and buildings throughout our existence. We are really the leader in many ways of sustainability in the Southeast with buildings, and have worked on energy code, have worked on programs such as Earthcraft, and have been part of things like LEED and so on and so forth. So excited to be here. It's a really exciting time for sustainability, and you all are in the right place to talk about this.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'm Ryan Taylor. I'm an architect. I founded Ryan Taylor Architects more than 20 years ago. We're also a real estate school. Lots of people ask us how we do what we do, so we teach professionals. Everybody's welcome to join any of our courses that wants to. I sit on Georgia State Codes Advisory Committee. That's the state committee that adopts and amends Georgia's building codes, and have a long-standing relationship with the Energy and Natural Resources Policy Committee at the Georgia Chamber. So happy to serve on that committee to provide explanations as to what's going on with building codes and emerging and evolving technologies. So thank you to the Georgia Chamber for this inaugural event, but also for this long relationship and all the work that we've done. So there's a learning curve to realizing a successful building project, because success is more than just housing your operations. And so Dan's going to speak to the challenges of building and operating a project to share some of your experience. And Nathan's going to speak to the challenges of setting your goals and what to expect from your project team. So Dan, let's start with a question for you. So Electric Owl Studios, as you mentioned, is the world's first purpose-built LEED Gold certified film and TV studio. So what led your team to decide to set the goal of earning a certification for sustainable building?
So my business partner, Michael Hahn, and I, we ran Third Rail Studios in Doraville, which we opened about 6 years ago, and sold it 2 years ago. And he and I had talked about building a new studio brand and trying to bring it around the world. And we thought, you know, what are the gaps in the marketplace? What are we missing? And what do we care about? You know, that those two things are important to us. So we looked around and we noticed that there was some sustainability efforts in the physical production studio space, but not as a rule. You know, they didn't really focus on it. There are no sustainable film studios in the world, and we thought, well, that's an interesting concept. Why doesn't that exist? That was the first question, and we realized that there was probably just a perceived barrier to building in a green way, which I think a lot of people think about too. So we looked into it, and I might be answering another later question, sorry, but we looked into it and realized that we just felt that we could accomplish this and that we thought that we needed to set a bar for ourselves, because we didn't know what just saying green meant. So we looked into LEED certification and realized that we could achieve LEED Gold certification if we were smart and found the right partner. So that's really was the impetus, though, was to find something new in the marketplace and something that we felt passionately about. And you know, we're really excited that we were able to pull it off.
So when you say new in the marketplace, you're open a week.
We've been open a week, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Well done.
Thank you. I highly recommend opening a movie studio while there's a writer's strike and a potential. Hopefully they'll work that out soon, but thank you so much.
That'll make it easier to find your pace. Nathan, you talked a little bit about the work that South Face does. So you work across all stages of the building life cycle, so design, construction, and maintenance. Give us a quick sketch of what services a business owner is looking for in each phase of that life cycle, please.
Yeah, it really is important to think about sustainability in all those stages, and if you're in one of those stages, it's not impossible to actually work on sustainability. A lot of people with existing buildings think, oh, my building's set, I can't get a LEED certification. So what do I do? But starting with design, one of the best opportunities there is to set the goals, as Dan did with his organization, and there's a lot of goals out there. And actually, I think that's one of the things that we're trying to help inform people about, is that there's a wide variety of goals. LEED is one of those, but you could reach for a net zero building, you could reach for a zero carbon building, you could reach for an ILFI certification for a living building, and so there's a lot of different goals out there. And then the strategies with which to achieve those goals are increasingly interesting, and there's a lot of new technologies, but it's also becoming a lot more affordable to do that. And so we work with a lot of design teams, architects, developers, owners, to set those goals, and then to understand what strategies are out there to achieve those goals. And in many ways, you can do that at the same cost. So if you're looking to target lower carbon in your building, you have options available to yourself with your concrete. Which concrete mix do you want? And you might have 6 or 7 options of concrete mix, and one might be very heavy in carbon and one might be lower in carbon. And at the same cost, the choice is obvious. And so we really help to just inform the options, inform the goals, and help people achieve those goals. During the construction process, that's where a lot of the verification of effort towards those goals goes into place. And oftentimes what we see that through that process as well is you're building a better building. A LEED building is by nature a better building than one that's not LEED. A building that's an Earthcraft building is a better building because we're actually doing inspections in this building. We're feet on the ground verifying that the insulation is put in properly, that it's not wet. We recently did an inspection on a commercial building where the insulation was wet and there was drywall put up over wet insulation. Really bad stuff. So that's very important and a really good benefit of just some of these efforts for sustainability. And then finally, as you operate your building, knowing that you have options for sustainability at that point is really important as well. Certainly recycling. Recycling is becoming increasingly difficult. And so how do we continue to do better with recycling? And then how do we continue to do better with our operations? How do we save money? How do we lower our utilities? How do we take advantage of some of the new tax credits that are around in order to benefit from more efficient building systems and lower our utility costs, but also benefit from lower emissions?
So Nathan, it's important to have a relationship with someone who can guide you to those decisions, because you want to set your goals up front before you jump into a certification, right? You want to figure out what's best for your particular project before you start chasing a certification. So you want to rely on your project team to help you down that path. Dan, you've completed your design and building phases, right? So now you're able to look back at those with a bit of hindsight. You're moving into operations. But what were your key concerns in the design and building phase of your project?
So first, let me say I'm not a real estate person, so I'll do my best. My business partner, Michael Hahn, and his company, Capstone South, he's the real estate guy. I'm the film studio operations guy. However, I've learned so much about this that I feel like I can speak to it. I think, some of the concerns were, can we afford this? Especially with regard to LEED and all of the things on the checklist that we had to infuse into the studio. But as we started to look into it, we noticed that there were partnerships to be made. In fact, one of our partners is here today, Cherry Street Energy, who's an incredible solar company. Their business model allowed us to infuse the studio with solar panels, whereas in the past I've tried to price out the purchase of solar panels, and it really was a really difficult, barrier. So finding the right partners was key for us. We wanted to keep our construction costs low enough that we didn't have to charge. So if anyone here doesn't know what a film and TV studio like mine does, we don't make our own content. We're like a Bizarro hotel for movies and TV shows. So we build these beautiful purpose-built sound stages, production offices, and other ancillary space. And then Warner Brothers, Netflix, Amazon, et cetera, they lease our space for short term, 6 months for a TV show, things like that. So our goal was to not have to charge them for any of this green infrastructure. So that was really huge for us because everyone is interested in sustainability until they ask how much it is. And then then decisions need to be made. So that's the first question that I get from producers who want to check out the spot is, what's that going to cost me? And I'd say it's just an amenity, we give it to you. So they don't need to pay to plug into our 48 EV charging stations. It was important for us to figure that out. We had some supply chain questions throughout the process. That was difficult. Locking in the price of steel was not so fun, stuff like that. Concrete was not entirely available throughout the process. It was making sure that the schedule was right. So that's the same for anyone though. But really, this was my first foray into trying to construct a place that was heavily fortified with sustainable features. So just finding the right partnerships, finding the right ways to do it, infusing as much as we could to get the LEED certification and beyond. And this will be, I think, a never-ending process, which I'm excited about, which is what else can we bring in? We just hired a company called Bee Downtown to bring in 3 honey beehives into the property. Bee Downtown, what they do is bring in bees to urban areas, to corporate areas, and they tend to them, and then they actually give you experiences with your clients or your staff to actually beekeep. And then these are going to produce, I think, 90 pounds of honey a year for us, and they'll package it up and put our logo on it, and we can give it out as gifts to our productions. So it's just, and then the bees will pollinate an area of 18,000 acres around the studio, which is about 3 square miles. So it's just a cool thing to bring in, not that expensive. And, but really the challenges were just finding ways to get it done, to keep it at around our sustainability infrastructure probably ended up being about 1% of our construction cost, which was pretty great, actually. So that was the main concern.
And that's a great segue to our next question for Nathan. So, Nathan, you can apply an 80-20 rule to sustainable design, right? So the first 80% can have a relatively short payback period, but that last 20% can get pretty expensive pretty quick. So it just gets more challenging and more expensive as you set your goals higher and higher. So can you give us a sense of what are the most significant goals, the most impactful goals that you can accomplish in a sustainable design?
Yeah. And that 80-20 is really changing quite a bit too. What's in the threshold of 20 and when does that move into the 80? That's changing, and especially so with tax credits and what we're seeing with Inflation Reduction Act funding for manufacturers and then also the buyers of some of these technologies. But one of the things that we really like to see is just passive design strategies. How do we orient the building? Where do we position windows? A lot of our skyscrapers increasingly these days are just glass all the way around. That's not a very good insulator. So promoting actually other types of design strategies so that you get the glass for, of course, the windows and daylighting, but also you have better insulation from walls, and that's cheaper. So there's some passive design strategies that we like to see. That's basically free. And then with a lot of the new mechanical technologies, HVAC and water heating, they're moving more into the 80% of what's feasible versus the 20% that's not. And then new business models like Cherry Street for solar is moving from the 20% of maybe not possible into the 80% of something that is possible. And so what's been really neat over the past couple of years, and we're going to see more of it, is what's moving from the 80 to 20, from the 20 to the 80, and hopefully via that, the 20% who are really, really pushing themselves for adopting sustainability, that also changes, because probably 80% could be doing more while 20% are doing something, and we also want to see an inverse of the efforts that are put in place here, because it's possible, and as we talked about the goals earlier, based on whatever goal you want, there's a path to get there.
It's an exciting time in the industry with the tools that we now have for analysis. So I think people don't appreciate you can build a model and start to change out components in the model to see how it performs and inform your design that way instead of guessing your way through the process. So Dan, you've attracted attention for your project, but it's not just an interest in your building, right? So you're helping people understand better operations like the bees and the other things that you've been talking about. So tell us about your internal efforts. So your internal team, you have to explain to them, here's what we did, here's why we did it, so that they can operate the building and you can realize your performance goals for your building. How do you go about that?
Yeah, we have an onboarding process which has just started, so our staff is brand new. So And our actual staff is maybe 5 people. It's pretty lean and mean. But we also have vendors. You know, we have janitorial vendors. We have a security team. We have a lot of different vendors on site that are kind of under our umbrella. So it's really them taking a look at. We've done a pretty robust hand guide for the studio, and that is all the protocols and procedures just for the production clients and how they enter and exit the studio. You know, the boring stuff, and then also the sustainable elements as well. Just going through it, walking through it, answering questions. Making sure that we're all as knowledgeable as we can be. None of us are experts in this space. This is not my background is film and TV. It's not, you know, not a lifelong environmentalist per se, but we're learning, and we're learning together now. So just going over all those things, and then as our first production clients come in, they'll receive that hand guide, and we will sit down with them to describe what we have in place, how they can use it. And we wanted them to use this stuff. That was another thing. We were going to give them a catalog of, if you want to use this, you know, food dehydrator, it's going to cost this. I wanted to avoid that because I do find that people just don't get the stuff. So I took the cost on for us, rented this equipment. We have food dehydrators. We have styrofoam densifiers that take massive pieces of styrofoam that they sometimes build sets out of and crush them down into little cubes, you know, so it takes up less space in dumpsters. But it's really just explaining things. We cannot make our production clients do anything, but I found over time that if you make things simple for people, they will do it. Also on their side, on the Warner Brothers and Disney side, their sustainability departments have grown tenfold over the past 5 years, and they've been cleaning up their act in their actual productions. So they seem to be very open-minded about it anyway. We just try and give them a list also of local, you know, found a local water company that's like captures rainwater, and it's in Georgia, and we don't have to truck or fly water or, you know, bring it on boats, and it's in, you know, aluminum vessels, so it can be a never-ending recycling program. So things like that, we're going to fill all their fridges up with that and say, if you want to keep buying that, that's the stuff. Here's the contact info. So kind of gently guiding them to make those decisions. But we've been doing a ton of research, and I really think if you just kind of make things an easy handoff, then they're much more apt to move forward with it.
Yeah. You said twice now you're not a real estate guy.
I'm a real estate guy.
I think you may be a real estate guy. Yeah. Don't tell anybody.
I do think about how rooftops and walls work and how to keep water out. So I guess so.
Right. So that's how you meet your challenge of the internal, right? The people who are coming in. But you also have people coming to you as a model to say, you know, we can see what you're doing. We've been following this building project, and you're sharing guidance with them.
Yeah.
To help them get to your level, and then you can continue to share in that community. Can you talk about your external efforts as well?
Yeah, and since we've had some press and you know, articles, things that are out in the public, we've gotten a lot of phone calls or emails, and we're happy to share everything. I love what we're doing. We're not trying to be cool kids. Like we want to share it and say, this is how we got there. Especially with other film studios in town, I think I got maybe 3 phone calls within a week of our grand opening from local film studios asking about Cherry Street Energy and the solar and things like that. What did you do? And I just connected them and say, you know, please talk with that group. They're amazing. So really just educating as informally as I can. If anyone reaches out, we're happy to share. I think it's important, you know, mostly because I do think that people did think there was a barrier to entry. I really think that's a huge component of what might be changing now, is that everything seemed to be so expensive before, but I think people are getting smarter in ways of presenting their new businesses and new ideas and sustainability. So we're happy to share with anyone, and I'm always happy to sit on a panel and talk about it, and, you know, takes a lot for me to shut up. So
right. It's an important point that both of you have made, that there's a perceived barrier to entry. This is going to cost a fortune, but if you build it in, the payback can be, you know, really quick, and the cost can be relatively small. A lot of fundamentals. That's exciting stuff, Dan. Nathan, you made a really important point earlier when you talked about existing buildings. right? So we don't want to assume that all projects are new construction, that, starting with a clean piece of paper, because there are a lot of people with existing facilities and they're trying to figure out how to manage those. So, can you talk just a little bit about what goes into the difference between working in new construction versus existing buildings? What are the key challenges in existing buildings?
Yeah, one of the interesting things with existing buildings is the payback period question is much more intense, and you're working with different budgets. And so when we're looking at mechanical systems, we might say, okay, when is the expected end of life of that? And depending on that answer, it might be possible to work for a more efficient solution. It might not be as well. So we have to work with the understanding what the end of life is for that and see what the ROI is for that. Increasingly, at Southface, we're trying to talk about all this in the framing of ROI. So trying to move away from the notion of first cost and more of a notion of ROI. And actually that parallels extremely well with operations. As you're operating a building, you're constantly thinking about how long it's going to last. You're thinking about preventative maintenance. You're thinking about all these different things that mean you are continuing to operate, be online, and not have any issues with failures. And so those are a couple components. But I'll also say that the barriers to entry in existing buildings is also the perception is very high there, that the barriers of entries are very high. There's a lot fewer certifications available to note that a building is a certified green building once it's being operated, once it's actually in existence, and especially so if you're a tenant in a building, what can you do about that? And so actually one of the things at Southface that we've done is we've released a new green building certification called BIT Building, and that works to achieve this. So it's a program focused on existing buildings that meets any building where it's at. It's for all buildings, and it's for tenant-controlled spaces. We've got a wide variety of early adopters, and we've got this certification actually all over the world. There's buildings in Tokyo, there's buildings in Hungary, all over the place that actually have worked through BIT Building. And so what's exciting about that is we really are trying to push down the barriers to entry and also the notion of the barriers to entry for sustainability.
That's really exciting. I know Dan travels a lot. Are you going to Tokyo and Budapest and all these other places for your certification?
For the studios?
No, for Nathan. I didn't realize that you were global, right? That's tremendous growth.
Not yet for me, but hopefully one day.
Okay. Well, let me just use that as a segue, another question to follow up on. So there's just the terminology in the business can be confusing, right? There can be just an avalanche of acronyms coming at you. And one of the fundamental things that I think people confuse is the difference between sustainability and resilience, right? So can you help us unpack the two and then just compare them so people can understand how they're different?
Yeah, that is a really interesting one, and we debate it internally at Southface. We're a bunch of engineers, architects, and building science professionals, and so we geek out on this stuff. But the way I frame it is sustainability is a bit more proactive, and resilience is a bit more preventative. And so when I'm thinking about proactive, I'm thinking about how am I reducing my utilities over time? How am I reducing my emissions over time? How can I demonstrate to my brand? How can I have my brand be more resilient, be more prepared for the future as people are expecting brands to have sustainability elements to how a brand operates and what it does. On the resiliency side, I see that from a prevention of stormwater, heat waves, things like that are making buildings have to operate in increasingly complex conditions, and so I usually divide it that way. But others will debate other options.
Is it too simple to say sustainability is performance-minded and resilience is operations-minded? You're protecting your operations with resilience.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, Dan, to that point, you've got all these goals out there that you can set, and you've talked about how you set some of those, but to actually realize your project, talk us through how you put together your project team, right? So you found people like you talked about, some of the partners that you've had.
Sure. I mean, from the sustainability standpoint, or entirely?
The whole thing, if
The
you
whole
would just,
thing.
yeah.
It was easy. No, just kidding. we had worked with, we had already had a general contractor on board, Grifco, their local design build company. They built Third Rail, our previous studio, so we knew we wanted to work with them. We like the way they build studios, and they're an extremely efficient general contractor, not as much waste as some other construction teams, and very practical team. So that was important for us. And then studios, up until recently, film studios have not been the favorite investment of investment firms, and certainly not even for debt from debt sources. Most people just didn't understand how they worked. Like at an office building, you get a 5 or 10 year lease for a company to move in, and it's very solid. Our shows are anywhere from 3 months to a year, and that's it in some of our spaces. So people didn't really understand it for a while, but in the last, I'd say, 5 years, maybe 4 years, some larger firms like the Hackman Group and Blackstone and groups like that have started to invest in studios because they're full every year, and studios don't go out of business. I've never seen a studio go out of business if you put it in the right place and have done your market research. So it was important for us to be in production hubs that we hope are evergreen. So Atlanta has been doing so well over the past decade or 12 years or so. And then our next studio, we hope to break ground in New York in 2 months here on the next Electric Owl. We just got some land in London for another one. So just making sure that we had the correct plan and putting them in the right place. And then for all the partners, it was really just a process of asking around, making phone calls, trying to find people who had an interest in this too, even if they had never worked on a film studio before. So there's a learning curve for certain groups, but made it work. Just finding good partners, and finding ways to see if there were other financial models for them that could work in case we found out that their pricing might not work for us. So allowing for some agility on that front, and them realizing too that maybe the marketing aspect and the being part of the greenest studio on earth might be a good thing for them as well. So finding those kind of partners. And, we had to I had my list of everything I wanted, and I got I think I got 80% of it, which is pretty good, but some stuff gets value engineered out. You just got to be open to it, of course. I wanted everything in the world,
That's our 80-20 rule.
That's it.
Right?
Yeah, that's right. But it worked out well. So really, I'd say the hardest part was just finding a capital partner. We found a great local capital partner called Domain Capital. They have mostly real estate investments around the world, and they were really on board. We wanted to find someone who loved the concept, who just wanted to be part of this as well, and that was important to us. And they're a great partner, and they're going to be our capital partners throughout the world as well. So we hope that Grifco, the GC, will build the other studios, at least the New York and maybe LA studios. I don't know if they're going to go to London, which is a whole other thing. But just time. It took a while, but it's been a 3.5 year odyssey to get to this point. But I realize in the grand scheme, that's actually pretty decent.
Yeah.
14 months of construction,
Yeah.
and we're happy it all came together.
Well, to be the first, so you set an example.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It's a challenge, as you say, on any project, whether it's residential, commercial, whatever, to explain the value in what you're doing. So it's a lot of work, but a lot of payback as well. Well, we're out of time for our panel discussion. So I'll just conclude by saying thank you to the Georgia Chamber. It's just so exciting to be here for the inaugural event. This is so important and great discussion for us to have. So please join me in thanking Nathan and Dan for their time and willingness to share their experience.